um 14:33 Uhr ungefähr, mitteleuropäischer Ortszeit, zum Wichtigsten, zum Kern, nämlich zum Produkt. Wer häufiger hier ist, der weiß, dass Skandinavien ein beeindruckend hohes Niveau beim Design und auch bei dem Konzeptionieren von Zeitungen hat, obwohl die Titel und die Unternehmen dort oft nicht sehr groß sind. In diesem Jahr ist uns das Morgenbladet aus Norwegen aufgefallen. Begrüßen wir bitte vom Morgenbladet Anna B. Jensen, Christina Ulriksen und Pedda Bernhard.
Thank you so much. Is there a... Yep, thank you. My name is Anna Jensen. I'm the editor-in-chief of Morgenbladet, and this is my colleague Peter Bernhard here. He's the art director, and Christina Ulriksen, the photo editor. The 1st of January 1819, the young priest Nils Wolfsberg published his very first edition of Morgenbladet. Wolfsberg and his wife were famous for their salons, and he was more of a talker and a networker than a priest. The first edition was very small, only 4 pages, 1 sheet folded. The slogan, if one may call it that, was advertised a daily newspaper of all kinds of content. This slogan itself, utterly bland and meaningless to modern ears, was news back then. This was one of Norway's very first dailies, and the only daily from back then, which is still in print. But now we're weekly. Morgenbladet's history is closely linked to the history of Norway emerging as an independent nation. But unlike Norway, Morgenbladet has several times been close to death. It was one of Oslo's largest newspapers early last century. It closed down during the Second World War, continued as a daily afterwards, although on the brink of bankruptcy several times, until the early 1990s, when it was reborn as the weekly we know today in the continental tradition. The Norwegian newspaper market is almost tabloid only. In 2003, Morgenbladet was reborn again, this time as a tabloid. The result was massive growth, although we're talking percentages and not actual numbers. When I took over as editor in 2012, we wanted to bring the tabloid up to date and give the paper both online and on print, bring it into a new era. How does a newspaper survive for almost 200 years? We think it's because we have a tradition for innovation. We have our roots in Norway, but we have a global outlook and work every day to counter polarization, populism, and nationalism. We pride ourselves among the most trusted Norwegian papers, but we also joke around a lot. We're either dead serious or completely bonkers, intellectual but warm. The paper may be old, but the staff is very young. When we redesigned, we wanted this dynamic to come through on every page, and we wanted to look like nothing else in the Norwegian market. As I said, this is a very tabloid market, dominated by a school of design suited for those needs. It works wonders for big newspapers like VG and Dagbladet, but even the more serious quality newspapers are infused with the same logic. We wanted nothing of that, which is why we chose the German agency Erler Skibet Hansmann to do the redesign. They had just redesigned Süddeutsche Zeitung, a paper we find very beautiful. And both Christian Tansman and Henning Skibbe are here today, and we would like to thank you very much for your great work. And now I'll give the mic to my colleague Peter Bernhard, who does the design every day.
Thank you. When we say that our visual language lies somewhere between a continental broadsheet tradition and the magazine aesthetics, you deserve a further explanation of what we mean by the 2 outer points. For most of us, black and white are still some of the first words which comes to mind when talking about the traditional newspaper look. Although the reasons used to be purely technological limitations, a certain soberness and a necessary attention to contrast, the blackness of a title and the greyness of the copy, they are side effects of the black and white look. Since most newspapers have been printing in full color for at least the last 10 years or so, and we take full color for granted in any media we use, the semantics of the hard contrast between bold black typefaces, lots of copy, and the limited discipline use of color give associations to a serious newspaper with long traditions. This is a randomly chosen spread from Morgenbladet from the 1920s. Still, we allow ourselves to look to how magazines have developed another kind of refined presentation, a more illustrated way, a more colorful way. And with contrast not only created by the shades of black, but also by conscious and generous use of white space. The magazines also differ from the newspaper by fewer limitations when it comes to production. A wider range of paper qualities, full bleed printing, to name a few. For us, keeping our feet securely planted in the newspaper print production, we are in no danger of being taken for a magazine. I'd rather like to think of us as a newspaper challenging how to think new thoughts within traditional boundaries, while at the same time using the very same established traditions to strengthen us.
Okay, when I started at Morgenbladet a bit over 5 years ago, our sizes of the photos were only 10 by 15 centimeters. They weren't a priority on the page, just a box to be filled. Much has changed since then, largely thanks to Anna, who has a strong visual language and wanted a redesign for the newspaper. She saw that the need for Morgenbladet to have a visual profile to reflect its content. So, how do we visualize our content? Morgenbladet is not a typical newspaper. Being a weekly gives the reader another tempo and feeling. We wanted to set a language that separates us from the daily newspapers. We are rarely reporting from the decisive moment, but often what happens after an event. We go behind the news and try to get a better understanding with long reads and in intellectual content. One could say that we work on the slow pictures. They should last for more than a week. They shouldn't be the same photos as you see in the dailies. And this reflects our visual expression and storytelling. I believe we give it thought, create a mood, and give room for your own interpretation. Nowadays at Morgenbladet, the photography does not need to tell exactly the same story as the text. Rather, they can complement each other or even create another level to the text. We especially see this in our more analytic text and reportages. So, how did we get there? It was important that the photographers had to say and how they should be used. Photographers should not be used as fillers of blank boxes in the layout. We wanted to use our energy where it was needed, to challenge the way photography is used and find different ways of creating visual storytelling. We should work together with the journalists as a team and not be attached at the end. We started saying no to images from press conferences or a headshot of the subjects sitting in their offices, because we wanted to photograph what the story was actually about and not their talking heads. The editors gave their trust that we could solve these matters, leaving them to concentrate on the text. So most of the images that I've shown up here has been taken by our two staff photographers, Christian Belgaard and Katinka Hustad, and they make my job a lot easier and a lot of fun. Morgenbladet also supports long-term photo projects driven by Norwegian photographers, creating a gallery space for them inside the newspaper. This is an opportunity for our readers to see great contemporary photography and Morgenbladet to take part and support the photography community. But sometimes it is difficult to photograph the abstract idea. Many of the fields Morgenbladet covers, such as politics, science, and intellectual debate, are abstract and challenging to visualize. We are often in need of interpreting illustrations, a visual element that grasps the core of the idea and offers assistance to the reader. But luckily, we have 3 fantastic illustrators that we work with every week. Their drawings are found on the same page in every edition and accompany opinion pieces. Their work can complement the text or stand alone and offer its own comment and interpretation. All 3 are very different in style, but bring their own unique voice to the paper and have a substantial following. But we also commission many illustrators to visualize complicated topics. One example is the cover story, A Professor's Mighty Groan. It was illustrated by Mari Kanstad Johnsen. The story was about harassment of female academics in an institution dominated by men, and was a precursor to the Me Too debate. Her use of color creates a certain discomfort and a claustrophobic feeling. And the last one I'm going to present did not have such a complicated topic, but shows how we dedicated a whole series to one illustrator. Combining a poppy cartoon look with classical music, we found a good combination. So we used Christian Hammerstad, 20 weeks in Morgenbladet, to show this classical series.
Morgenbladet is not the only newspaper in Norway who wants to look serious or intellectual, or continental for that matter. So what makes our approach different from other Norwegian papers? Hopefully, without being too technical, I can briefly go through some of the characteristics of our design as we take a look at some examples on how it works well. Whereas most other Norwegian tabloids follow the 5-column standard grid, developed to go hand in hand with the standardized set of ad sizes, Morgenbladet uses a 21-column grid. Most of the time, we could actually have managed with only 7 of them. For our long reads, we wanted a wider body text column than the 5-column grid can offer. Using the 7 columns, we always have at least half a column left to fill with either white space, a quote, facts, or most preferably a little something which gives the page a bit of life or contrast, character, or mood. The typefaces we use are all contemporary, or at least drawn in recent times, but based on classic book and newspaper traditions. But remember that a classic typeface doesn't have to be used classically or conservatively. I spoke earlier of black and white contrasts as a typical newspaper look. This, for example, is very black and white, but not an old-fashioned use of type. It points out to more to a kind of magazine look, where it's more common to mark the start of a feature story with more generous space and contrast than what is normal in a newspaper. The 21-column grid is used more on the complex spreads, where different stories with different lengths and characters are presented. When we're able to make these spreads work, they are actually my favorite kind of pages. The variety, the numerous small elements placed in order, the vertical rhythm, the different temperatures of the illustrations and elements on the page. These are also very newspaperish characteristics. It's more colorful and perhaps a bit less compressed than how it appeared in the old times, but the similarity to a lively but tidy message board is the same. So, as you can see, we constantly find ourselves on this spectrum, somewhere between the old broadsheet and the magazine, trying to balance between the two. We are, and we want to remain, a newspaper, not a poor man's quasi-magazine. And I believe we've found a platform for communicating many of our abstract and intellectual articles to a group of readers, also on paper, actually younger than one could expect.
Yes, our readers are very young and getting younger. In fact, more than half of them are younger than 40 years. This year, we've gone back to our roots as a daily online. You can log on now to morgenbladet.no every day and find quality content to read, watch, or listen to. The results are very good. We have doubled our online traffic. We are deepening our grasp of our core readers and reaching further than before with provocative and playful journalism every day. In other words, Morgenbladet is a very healthy 199-year-old. Thank you.
Anna, only one short question, please. How many people work in your staff, and how many care for the design of the newspaper? Because we in the German-speaking markets have the tradition, a lot of writers, no photographers, no designer. Little.
We're the same in Norway. We have about 35 in our staff in total, 35. And these are the visual people. No, they are 4 or 5, I would say, that work visually. Yeah. So very small visual department making marvelous stuff. Yeah.
A small newspaper, but a great product. Thank you very much.